Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host, and this is a podcast about all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work, everything that you could possibly imagine about work and talent and HR. So the episode will live on our website, scaled also on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to hit a like button, subscribe, share, comment, please, I always want to sort of hear from you. And I personally love a good debate, conversation, also, an argument too. So feel free to sort of share your comments. We launch new episodes every Thursday morning on LinkedIn, Instagram, and then other places also. So this is a really good topic. I know that I always say that, but this is a really good one. It's called Redefining and Evolving the Chief People Officer. And we have a fantastic guest, Joanna Kmiec, who's head of HR, senior executive here in Canada with a tech company. I'll let her tell us all about that. But I just wanted to share just a couple of things about obviously being in HR or being part of the HR community for 25 years now. We've always talked about the head of HR, chief people officer. There's a lot of different titles. I know they're all different, but I think the first point that I want to make is really this, is that we've been talking about this for a long time. And the chief people officer, HRO, is no longer just about HR operations. And so it's not about administrative pay and benefits and things like that. I know we've been saying that for a long time. It's truly a business driver. It's a business function, right? That's the first thing that, people need to really understand. And, obviously they are tasked with, shaping culture, talent, and then broader organizational success. So it's really, and I'll say it again, it's a business driver. And so that's really what the CPO role is all about, is that. Point number 2, we need new skill sets. It's a skill set shift, business mindset. So modern chief people officers need to be data-driven, tech savvy, and deeply aligned with the business goals to really influence the senior executive level. I run a lot of different events with communities, and I always hear from senior executives that, I'll send my HR manager or I'll send my generalist. I'm like, but you should also be there too, because you need to be at the forefront of all of these things. And now we have AI, which is obviously has landed, and that's not going anywhere. And the CPO will really need to be fully integrated into that, and then how to take advantage of that. But that's enough, for me. Joanna's here. She's going to break it all down for us. And so I just want to welcome you to the Unmuted Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I've been looking forward to this one for a bit, so really glad to be here.
It's been a while. We've been planning this for a while. We've been going back and forth, and obviously people have busy schedules. You're probably traveling around the world doing great things. So maybe you can just tell the audience sort of what you do.
Yeah, I'm the SVP of People and Culture for Elastic Path Software. I lead our People and Culture team, and we look after a global employee base. We basically lead and run the strategy for the company. And what that looks like on a day-to-day would probably entail something like trying to foster transparent cultures, leveraging feedback that we get from our employee base, creating an employee experience that helps people do their best work and through that drive business results. And then using the strategy to leverage all areas of people and culture in order to drive the achievement of those business goals and make sure that people can do what they need and the roadblocks are removed to really get those metrics for success. In a bit of a nutshell, I think that's the key areas where we're spending our time.
And the company has actually grown quite a bit in the last little while.
The company has grown and fluctuated a little bit, We've sort of fluctuated between that 100 to 200 people mark on and off. And now we're in a bit of a period of maintenance and really focusing on the experience as we do that.
Fantastic. So just diving into my first question, it's about the chief people officer role, actually evolving. So what are the new skills that this role needs to have for the future?
Yeah, like you said at the very beginning, it's no longer just enough to try to build or impact culture on some level. You have to be able to support your business's revenue growth. You're enabling high-performing teams, increasing productivity so people can help meet those targets. You're reducing costs, especially in today's world and market. You're leaning into the automation. You're leaning into enablement. And the skills that you need for that now are, as you said, tied to people analytics, being very data-driven, decision-making. You're looking at the workforce, you're looking at compensation, you're looking at your HR tech stack and where AI can help you enable processes through that. You're scaling culture in sometimes hyper growth environments or hybrid environments, which have their unique challenges. You're trying to embed culture into that. And you've got other areas like HR tech, automation, AI that's coming in, where in the last year, people have really started to leverage this more and to create efficiencies that the broader organization can leverage. But the key here, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, it's you're now a business leader. You need that business acumen, that financial acumen to really understand how your company makes money, how all of your leaders lean into their areas to help support those metrics, and how you're going to help.
Yeah, I think obviously it's easier said than done, as we both know. I mean, HR or people and culture is a very broad area. What have you? This is sort of a like a follow-on type question from a skills point of view. I mean, what have you done really to upskill yourself? I mean, for me, I went to business school many years ago, and what we learned back then is, I guess, baseline knowledge is still applicable today, but most of it isn't really. So, how have you upskilled yourself? Have you wrapped a team around you? What have you done to really make sure that you're at the forefront?
Yeah, I think it comes from a number of different areas. There's the mix of your education within what you're actually doing within the organization, because what you'll need to know will be in some way specific to your business and your business's needs. So I've belonged to a number of groups out there that leverage the knowledge of other executive leaders and their true problem cases and areas that they're learning as they go and sharing that knowledge. Sometimes it's at a conference, sometimes it requires very specific and dedicated training. So attending sessions on AI, but not just general AI, not just how do you prompt in ChatGPT. It's more around what are the key areas in HR that you can leverage different variations of AI to either help you create summaries, to help you take a look at feedback and results and look for patterns. It's really elevating that. And that's the piece where I think is the biggest gap. And so it's been attending programs, attending courses that take a look at HR specific use cases and then where you can start to implement that in your own organization. But that then has to be coupled with spending time with the right leaders in your organization to understand their side of the business. How are we supporting our customers? How is product doing? What are their key pain points? And then how do we put what we know and what we do in HR? How do we leverage that to enable those teams learn those areas of the business and then actually be able to tie together what you're doing to support us achieving the metrics?
I mean, I think you absolutely nailed it. I think when I was a head of HR and I was working in smaller organizations, the first people that I always connected with, so when I started a new role, was the CFO, CMO, marketing, CSO, sales, and then our operations leader. Though in that order. So CFO, obviously, but because I wanted to understand what's going on in the business. So, HR touches everything, which is very different. So just shifting gears here, what in your view separates a truly strategic CPO from one who is merely reactive? So, I mean, how can leaders prove their business values? So they're sort of looking at the differences.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it comes down to business alignment and positioning HR as a growth driver versus just a support function. If you're acting like a support function, everything you do will be reactive. Now, don't get me wrong. We all know there are fires. We all know that a portion of almost every day gets taken up by something we weren't expecting. But I read somewhere once that, if you don't prepare for tomorrow, if we don't do what we need to today, you die today. But if you don't prepare for tomorrow, that's not far behind you. And so you can't be just reactive. You need to set time aside to work closely with the divisions, work closely with leadership to drive financial and operational success. And what does that look like? Are we preparing in advance for the skills that we're going to need? If product needs some AI specialty or skills, do we have that in-house? And if not, how are we going to get it? It's not always waiting for the need. It's trying to see around corners and anticipate those needs. And that applies to every area of HR. That applies to your employee experience, proactively trying to design one that is flexible, that can be personalized versus crisis management mode. Treating employee experience as your product, because then you're constantly iterating, you're elevating, you're finding improvements before you run into problems where possible, and applying that to your HR tech stack, being ready for growth, being ready for what you need, and taking a look at your infrastructure to see if you have that in place and at what time that'll be beneficial for your growth. So it's really just trying to, as I said, look around corners, try to future proof where you can versus constant being in damage control mode. Oh, really hard.
I mean, I think you mentioned one word, skills. I think with the growth of AI, that is giving us the answer right there. How many employees are able to use the right tools safely, securely? If you can upskill people across the business in that, you're doing a fantastic thing, right? So this is a really good question. What are the biggest misconceptions about working in HR? That's the first part of the question. Second part is, and who should not pursue a career in it?
Okay, yeah, this one's gonna maybe ruffle a few feathers once we get to the who part. But a lot of the misconceptions, I mean, anybody in HR has heard this. Oh, it's just about hiring and firing. It's not. It's about the entire life cycle. It's just about enforcing rules. You walk around with a handbook. It's a support function, or it's super easy. It's for people who like planning events and social activities, or the typical anyone can do HR, where effective leaders need to master a whole plethora of areas that you need to build through a combo of education experience. It's also that people think that it's a very straightforward job where there's not a lot of pivoting. That's a huge misconception. I once had someone reach out to me who had been in recruiting for most of their career, and they thought that maybe making a shift to HR would be easier for them. And so this goes into the next part, who should not pursue a career in HR. And it's not that that role shouldn't. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if your perception of HR is those things that I just mentioned, you're going to have a difficulty pivoting. And so, for example, who should not pursue a career in HR? Don't go into it if you require a lot of structure to be productive, if you don't like ambiguity and change, if you're not comfortable with data and analytics, if you see HR as just helping people because you're also driving the business, if you prefer something predictable and low stress, if you think your role will be 9 to 5, especially if you're in tech or in a startup. And this one is really important. If you need constant accolades and to be acknowledged for everything you do, while this would be amazing, and while we like to recognize good work, a lot of what you do will be in the shadows. And at times you need to be okay knowing you're the assist. You're the one giving the assist so others can get the goals. If you can't have a difficult conversation, steer clear. If you can't switch gears multiple times a day and go from topic to topic to topic, maybe think twice. And if you like to stay in the background, this is one that I like to explain that doesn't usually come up high on the list. If you like your role to be in the background, it won't be for you. And the reason I say this is one of the only teams in the entire organization who will have every initiative they roll out, every decision they make, scrutinized from the personal lens of the amount of employees that you have in the organization. Because you impact their roles, right? You impact their lives, their jobs, their day-to-day, and they all come at it from what's important to them. So if you're not comfortable with that magnifying glass being on every decision you make, even when you've got to make the tough decisions and be accountable for them, that's probably something you should think twice about.
That was a fantastic answer. But I want to get your reaction to this statement. This is something, so you didn't mention this, which is fine. I have no problem with that. People tell me that they go into HR because they are a people person. What's your thought about that?
It's interesting you mentioned that. When I first started in HR, I reported into a director. It's a very long time ago now. And I once said to her, after we had a really tough time, we had a merger and a lot of terminations. And I started to question if it was for me very early on. And I just said, well, I was told that if you're a people person and if you love just working with people, this is the thing for you. And very early on, she said to me, that is actually false. And initially, I didn't understand it. And over time, I learned that it's not about being a people person. It's about being strong enough to take on the role of enabling, helping, supporting people through life challenges while they try to do the best job they can do at the business that you're in. So yes, you have to like people, but you have to respect people. You have to value differences, but you also have to be able to understand and be ready for the fact that your role is to enable them in supporting the business. And so it's not just about being a people person. It's about being a business leader who knows where people and business intersect and making that work along all the messiness of being human and then all the expectations of being in a business.
I couldn't have said it any better, so high five on that. So this is a bit of a different question. I want to take a bit of a turn on this. Say you're a candidate. You're being interviewed for a new chief people officer role. what are the red flags that candidates should be looking for when they're actually looking for a new job? They're being interviewed, by different organizations. That's the first part. The second part of the question is, how can they advocate for their worth in the job market? Because in my career, it's always been like, well, CFO is always above the CPO. And it's like, really? And so anyway, that's just my own experience. So what red flags should candidates be looking at? And then how can they advocate for their worth?
And this is a really interesting one because I've seen a lot online about this. I've had people who are looking for roles come to me to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to preface this with, I'm going to share some red flags, but the key here is having the guts and the confidence to not only recognize them, but take them for what you see them when you do recognize them, because that's where I think is a bit of that challenge where you're looking for a role, you want or need a new role, and you see these flags and you either tend to think, oh, I can deal with that, or oh, I can turn that around, or I can change it. And so then asking those questions to dig further is important. So a couple of red flags. There's a few around, let's say, leadership or culture. What those could look like is seeing a lack of executive alignment or buy-in on HR's role or the CPO's role. And what that can look like is, as you're talking to leaders, you're asking questions like, how do you typically partner with the CPO? What does that partnership look like? What are some examples of where you've gone to or worked with your CPO to resolve, an issue on your team? Sometimes that looks like a founder or a CEO being a little resistant to delegation. So finding out where you're really going to get to lead and where your input will be valued versus, is this a role where you're just going to be told what to, very different positions. Anything that might flag a bit of a toxic or unsustainable work culture. So if you're asking about turnover rates, especially, voluntary turnover rates, especially, and if you're getting it blown off a little bit, oh, we're not worried about that, or it's just this. Dig a little bit more, look into your research, because while, yes, a toxic or difficult culture can be turned around, be sure you're ready for what that's actually going to look like and that the team you're working with is ready and wanting that type of change. If there's no defined values or North Star for the organization, if the role structurally has unclear or undefined expectations. So if you're told by the CEO or the C-level team, well, we need you to come in and fix culture. Well, what does that mean to you? What is the definition of fix culture? Make sure you're understanding what they mean by that question and what that's going to look like. If it looks like the CPO is not included in important decision making at a business level, I'm not just talking about people and culture. Are you truly at the table? Are you a part of that? Do you have the budget and or the resources to meet the goals that are being set out for the role and what that looks like? And when you've asked about that, what type of answer are you getting? In terms of the employee relations, do you sense a resistance to change? Again, do your research. And then in terms of sort of hiring and comp, are they paying well below market? How are they trying to leverage that? Do you feel that there's a disconnect between how this role is viewed and the other C-level positions of this role are? I mean, there's one example I've seen that I want to share recently in the market. As people have come to me, they say, well, I don't see a lot of CPO roles. I'm seeing a lot of director or VP roles, but they're also the head of. And what they're expected to do is at CPO level. Ask about that. If they're hiring a director or VP level and every other key position has a C-level person in place, why is that? So it's making sure you ask those questions. Now, I know you asked about how do you show your value. This is really, really important because this drives into that business leadership. You need to be able to speak the language that the CEO is speaking, that the CFO is speaking, that the head of, your CTO is speaking. Can you understand how customer success works and the value there? Can you give examples of how what you've done or implemented or how you've partnered with those leaders has elevated or enabled those teams to provide better customer service to your customers? Are you able to speak to the business goals? Are you asking about profit margins, what is needed? Are you speaking intelligently about go-to-market, asking about those plans and how you can support sales and marketing in those plans? You've got to be able to show not only do you get it, but how you're going to impact that in a way that the C-level will say they can actually make a tangible difference to the business and not just what you're doing from the people initiative standpoint, if that makes sense.
Those are all excellent. suggestion. Can't really think of anything else other than this. One thing in my career has been, if someone tells me, we want you to be the social coordinator of employee parties and social gatherings and things like that, and that seems to be their definition of actually building workplace culture, that is a massive red flag for me. That's like, I'm sorry, but I didn't build my career to organize social events, right? That's the first one. The second one really is, there's a lot of misconceptions, and I know that. So my thing is that if they recognize that as they're talking and they're open to changing it, that I can deal with, right? But if, as you said, laid out all these red flags, if they're pretty well entrenched in their beliefs and you don't get the feeling that you have that ability to actually change those things, then that probably steering you in the direction of, this isn't really right for me. So,
Yeah, and
it's
being brave, as we talked about. I mean, everyone says, oh, that's easy to say, but when you're looking for a job, and I'll be honest, I'll put my hand up. When I interviewed here almost 3 years, and I met with the CEO, one of the first things I said was, look, I'm going to be honest. I knew in my mind this could risk the opportunity for me, but I did say, if you're looking for someone whose focus is on the event calendars and just the social side of it, don't hire me, because you won't be using the skills that I have, and you can find someone else for that. I'm looking to partner with you, with the executives, with the C-level team and the leadership to really drive the business forward. And if that's not how you view the role, or to your point, if you're not open to seeing it differently, then, I'm happy for us to, part ways on that. But very, very happy to see that the answer was no, that's actually not what I want at all. I want this other side. And, 3 years later, we're here. And I think that's really important, that people see you need to have the confidence to pitch what you want, pitch the value you can bring. And if it's truly not aligned with where you can add the most value and do the most good, really give that some thought before going forward.
And I think that's a very good point, where you're basically at the in the road. So I always viewed it that way. You can either go that way or this way, and it's based on their response, and genuine or not, right? So obviously, when you ask a really pointed question, they're going to answer in their way, body language, all of those things. So that's a really good way of doing it. And the other thing too that I've learned in my career too is that I really tried to learn from really good salespeople, heads of sales, because they're very good at, and I'm not talking about these sleazy car salesperson thing. Okay, that's a stereotype. But what I'm talking about is someone who was really good at pitching and being confident and focusing on the right things, timing. That's not a skill that like HR leaders naturally develop. They didn't really go to school for that. I have a business background, but most people didn't, right? So, and I'm still not that. Like, I'm still learning all those things. So if you can sort of up your game on that side of things from an HR leader's perspective, I think you'll be doing yourself a really good favor. So.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, actually. I think a lot more people, if they tapped into something like that, the way that they present those specific key things would come across a lot better and hit the way that they need it to.
Well, Joanna, this has been excellent. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. This is an excellent conversation. I mean, I could go on for hours, but I'm sure people watching this probably don't. So a lot of work to do probably. So thank you for being here. Once again, this is the Unmuted Podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday morning, and we talk about all things HR, talent, world of work. All of our guests are HR leaders like Joanna. They could be HR tech experts, AI people, talent, and so on. And so episodes live on our website, GoScaleHR.com, on our YouTube channel. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe so that you get notified of a new episode. We just changed our branding a little bit. There's going to be some new thing coming out on the Scale website. It's going to be blown up halfway through, year. People have been asking about it. I've told them nothing. I'm not very good at keeping secret, but this one I am. So, Joanna, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.